Hello there. I haven't even got my light on. Hello there, friends. My name is Rachel G&S Middle. Gilbert and Sullivan is my middle name, and my middle name is my last name. And I am here on behalf of Forbear Theatre to explore the magic of the Gilbert and Sullivan operas by very pedantically ranking every element of them. Today we are going to be looking at choruses, and by that I mean the actual physical groups of people themselves and not chorus numbers, because there are approximately 19 million chorus numbers, so that would be very hard to do. As ever, we have a mark out of 20 for music. How much enjoyment do you get from the pure beauty of the music? I've not actually included a category for lyrics because I don't think the lyrics that the chorus sing really make it fun or not, or interesting for the audience or not. It does sometimes, but I think I've just put that in with music, if I'm honest. So any very clever lyrics that are nice to say will just come under the category of music in this instance. I've also given him a mark out of 10 for importance to the narrative. Is there anything the chorus do in this opera that actually drives the narrative? How much they are invested in the main story? I've also given him a mark out of 10 for emotional stakes. Sometimes the chorus aren't actually involved in the story per se, but they can still get the opportunity to react very emotionally to things that are happening around them. Some choruses won't really express too much emotion, other ones, our emotions are everywhere, and I think this makes it more fun as a chorus participant. I've given him a mark out of 10 for directorial scope. I've not directed Utopia, Princess Ida, or Thespis. But apart from those three, I have directed them all. This is basically how much we can do with these choruses as a director. How much fun can you have with them? Where is the craziest you can go with them? Or are you pretty much set to do a single boring thing with them? I know the most fun I've had directing has been when I've been able to do lots of crazy things with the choruses. I've also given them a mark out of 10 for stage time. I try to make this relative to the length of the opera, so even though Trial by Jury and even HMS Pinafore are quite short compared to the others, that's not going to impact their score because it will be relative to the length of the opera. I think a lot of people, even if they perform in a chorus and they're doing lots of exciting stuff with lots of emotional stakes, it can still be a bit boring for people if they're waiting around backstage for ages to go on. So I have taken that into consideration. So with that in mind, let's get started with number 26. So somebody has to be last, and in this case, it is the chorus of the gods from Thespis. The gods do have some what probably was very nice music, but they don't really have too much of it relative to the opera. I gave them an 11 out of 20 for that. I also don't think that they're particularly important to the narrative. I only gave them a 3 because you see them right at the start there. It's quite a static number, and I don't imagine you can really do very much with them there. And then we see them again in that little mini finale that's not a finale, it's just the finale to the little section with Mercury, Jupiter, etc. And then they come back again for the Act 1 finale, but again, they're the static ones and the mortal chorus are the ones that are getting to have fun. So I do think that the gods just fade into the background a little bit. They also don't have really cracking music to bring their score up like some of the others maybe in this position did. I gave them a 4 out of 10 for emotional stakes. I think there can be frustration there that they're losing their relevance, but apart from that, there's not really too many opportunities there for them to really show emotion, to really be vibrant. I gave them a 3 out of 10 for directorial scope, and because of what I've just been saying, it's just difficult to know what you do with this chorus. They are gods grown old, so you can't have them doing cartwheels everywhere. They have to be quite static. I suppose one way of getting around that would be to make them really over the top, maybe like giving them Zimmer frames and things. So you could be comedic with this chorus. I think if you were given a lot of time and a lot of resources and a lot of very, very funny people to work with. I gave them a 3 out of 10 for stage time. I think relative to the length of the opera, they're really not in it very much. And when they are, I just don't find them that interesting. If I was asked to be in the chorus of Thespis, I'd like, please put me in the Mortals chorus. I wouldn't want to be in the Gods chorus. I do not think. Number 25, I had given to the courtroom audience from Trial by Jury. Is that what we call them? By their nature, they're sat down the whole time, so directorial scope, I gave a 2. You can't do anything with these people. Yes, they get to emotionally react a little bit. I gave them a 3 out of 10 for emotional stakes because I just don't think that this is a particularly emotional opera. Even the principals aren't crazy emotional in this. I gave them a 5 out of 10 for stage time, even though they are literally on stage the whole time. They are not the focal point, I don't think, ever, apart from perhaps the very first number. So for that, I brought their stage time score quite low. I gave them a 13 for music. I think that is fair. I also gave them a 4 for importance to the narrative. I think they're a little bit more important to the gods. They don't drive the narrative, but they are very much a part of what's going on just in virtue of them always being there. But that is really all you can say about the courtroom audience. They are one of the most forgettable elements of any Gilbert and Sullivan opera, I think. I've sung in it several times, usually at potlucks. I'm gonna sneeze. No, I'm not. I've been in a courtroom audience. I'll probably be in it again. This is not a great chorus. If you were able to be in any chorus of any GNS opera tomorrow, would you choose to be in this one? And I don't think the answer would be yes. If it is, if you want to play devil's advocate and be that person, let me know, but I don't think I'll believe you. Number 24, I have given to the maids from school, or the schoolgirls from the Mikado. I gave them a 14 for music. I think their music is pretty, and it's certainly better than the ones I've previously talked about, but all of their other scores are very low. I've given them a 3 for their importance to narrative. They are basically singing wallpaper. Their emotional stakes I also gave a 3. Yes, they can have a bit of empathy for the situation, but since the characters in the Mikado are a little bit shallow and do tend to trivialise these life and death situations, which again I don't mind, it is very funny, but it does mean that the choruses just don't really have any weight. The emotions that the principals have are not really strong enough for the chorus to back them up, with the one exception maybe of when the leading alto enters in the Act 1 finale. Then having the chorus backing up that person, that's quite powerful. And I do think that is a good bit. But apart from that, I don't really see the chorus having much genuine emotion at all. I gave them a 5 for stage time. It's not horrendous. They do have a bit, not as much as the gentlemen. And I gave them a 3 for directorial scope because, again, what do you do with these people? I suppose in the sense that you can set any opera on the moon or in a carnival. I guess directorial scope is technically unlimited for every one of these choruses. But if we are trying to somewhat confine ourselves to the universe of what Gilbert intended, there's really not too much you can do with the Schoolgirls chorus and the Mikado. Their opening number is probably one of the weakest opening numbers of any chorus. Doesn't really tell you too much about who these people are, and what it does tell you is that they are introspective and curious, which might be interesting if anything else remotely was done with that information during the rest of their opera, but they're just observers from that point on. So we now move on to number 23, and actually between the last one and this one, there are 7 points. For some reason, there were 3. The gods, the courtroom audience, and the schoolgirls from the Mikado, they came really quite dead last and got fewer than half marks. We got 24, 27, and 28 points respectively. This next one got 35 points, which out of 60 I think is a respectable score. So number 23 are the Gentlemen of Japan from the same opera. They have a really cracking opening number. Their music, I think, is great. I gave them a 16 out of 20 for music. I love Gentlemen of Japan. I love all their responses in A Wandering Minstrel. I think they do so much legwork in that opening section that deserves their musical score being high. And I also think there is a fraction more directorial scope to them. I gave them a 4 because I think that at least there is mileage to have them moving around the stage in the same way that maybe you don't get with the Schoolgirls. There is a bit of mileage to be silly with them. I gave them a 5 out of 10 for importance to narrative, which, if anything, is generous, but it really is just that first section. They are very invested in all the introductions to the characters, and they really do help us understand who these characters are because they give them the correct amount of status. Emotional stakes I gave a 4. A lot of that, again, is this big opening section. After that, they kind of disappear and don't really have any more than the Schoolgirls have. But then their stage time, I do give them a 6 out of 10. Those choruses that have got really high marks in stage time, it's because whenever they are on stage, they are doing an awful lot of stuff as well. Number 22 goes to the Bridesmaids from Trial by Jury. I gave them a 14 out of 20 for music, which is the same as the Schoolgirls from the Mikado, and it's just above the Courtroom audience of Trial by Jury because they get that little bit of extra music, and I do happen to think that that entrance of the Bridesmaids is really good music. Comes a broken flower, comes the cheated May. It is a very nice, catchy tune. I think that you can make a big entrance there. You can be very sexy / silly with it. There's a bit more directorial scope. I actually gave them a 6 for directorial scope because once they've entered, there's so much you can do with them. They can be constantly moving around, flirting with people. I think they're a really great, vibrant addition to Trial by Jury. I also gave them a 6 for importance to narrative. I think even though their contribution to the story isn't always explicit, there's just so much that you can do with them that I think they're very helpful to have there. They can really show you what kind of person Edwin is, for example, when the first bridemaid is passing that note and is flirting with him. I gave them a 5 for emotional stakes because they do get to empathise with Angelina's situation. I only gave them a 5 for stage time because they don't enter for a while, and even though when they do, they're doing quite a bit, half the opera's gone by that point, really. So I don't think that we can really give them higher than that for stage time. But all in all, I think the Bridesmaids chorus from Trial by Jury are great. They are really fun. I've been in that several times, and every time it's been different as well. So I do think that this material does give the director a lot of chance to experiment and have fun. Number 21, and speaking of Trial by Jury, we move on to our final chorus in the Trial by Jury, which is the Gentlemen of the Jury. Though I only gave them a directorial scope of 3, in every other category they have just beaten the Bridesmaids. I gave them a 6 for stage time. Again, even though they are on the whole opera, actually, they are not enough of a focus the whole time or doing enough in order for me to really give them a higher mark than that. I gave them a 15 for music. They do have a lot of it, and some of it is very clever. I also gave them a 6 for emotional stakes because they actually have to express quite a lot of emotions over the course of this opera. They have to be quite angry and they have to be very in love with Angelina. The only reason it's not higher than that is because I don't really place too much weight on these emotions. This is a very comic opera. It's very silly, it's trivial, it's frivolous. I don't think I can really give them more than a 6, even though ostensibly they are expressing a whole range of emotions in this opera. I gave them a 6 for importance of the narrative. Since the opera is called Trial by Jury, they are technically the most important part of it. Do they drive the narrative? Do they ever do anything that changes the course of the story? I don't really think so, other than their responses driving these characters. Like, for example, saying to Edwin, monster, monster, that causes him to want to defend himself. As a defendant, he's defending himself, of course, but their responses do make the principal characters act in a way that maybe they wouldn't have done otherwise. So in conclusion, I do think that the jury is a very valuable part of Trial by Jury. Number 20, I have given to the Citizens chorus from the Yeomen of the Guard. I gave them a 16 out of 20 for music. They are hampered by their stage time. I only gave them a 5 for that, so they come the same as the schoolgirls from the Mikado did. The citizens are not on for a lot of Yeomen of the Guard, and also their importance to the narrative is not great. I only gave them a 5 for that. Apart from in the scene with Elsie and Jack Point in the middle of the first act, there's nothing that the citizens really do that drive the narrative. They're just more observers. And I gave them a 5 for directorial scope, but the vast majority for that is just that little section with Elsie and Jack Point, and maybe an Arquebus song in Act 2. But apart from that, they're not on a lot. Their emotional stakes I gave a 6, especially in the Act 1 finale. It is very important that everyone on the stage is really feeling those stakes and is in a panic, and that is what causes Elsie to faint. It's what causes Jack Point to run away. So in that sense, it's very important for the chorus to be emotional there, but that's the only time when they really get to be emotional. Maybe at the end of the Act 2 finale. That's a tricky little passage, because after Jack Point's big moment where he comes on and expresses himself to Elsie, the only thing the citizens say after that is Heidi. So we do not know what opinion the citizens were meant to have in that situation. Gilbert doesn't tell us. Sullivan doesn't tell us. So that's up to the director. And that is quite a difficult section. I don't think that these citizens were thought through as what kind of people are they. And maybe it is because they are just random citizens. They're all different people. And the individual actor has to make their own choice about who they are. And that means that they're not going to be very cohesive as a chorus, which, is that a drawback? I think in an opera such as Yeomen, it can be quite nice to have lots of individuals doing their own thing, but it does mean the director has to place a lot of trust in the individuals in the chorus, and that can be scary as a director. I did, though, give them a 16 out of 20 for music. What music they do have is glorious. When I directed Yeomen in 2021, we didn't have enough sopranos, bizarrely. I just put myself in the chorus of the opera so I could add my soprano voice to it. And I will tell you, I thought I was going to be so bored being in that chorus, and to an extent, physically, yes, it is boring. I don't think I did a single bit of actual acting in that whole opera. But you know, the singing is so good that it does make up for it. Tower Warders, amazing. The prisoner comes to meet his doom. That section, I'm telling you now, one of the best experiences I have had on stage at the festival. Hearing everyone else's voices around me and watching our musical director, and just I'm going to stay right in time with you. We drilled that section so well. And the Arquebus song was hilarious. The Act 2 finale, Oh Day of Terror, there's loads of cracking music. And so when you have a musical director, which I did, who understands and really appreciates this chorus material, it does actually bring up the enjoyment of being in that chorus a lot. And I would be in the chorus of Yeomen again. I do think that it is worth it, and the music alone makes it a lovely experience. Number 19, I've given to the Dragoon Guards from Patience. This is a chorus that suffers from its lack of stage time. They get a 5, but their lack of stage time in Act 2 is made up for slightly by just how present and vibrant they are in Act 1. I gave them a 14 for music, so that puts them on a par with the schoolgirls from the Mikado. They do have some lovely moments, like in Soft Note, so that is what brought it up to a 14. But those really glorious musical moments, I think, are quite few and far between for the Dragoon Guards. I gave them a 6 for their importance to the narrative. I think that the ongoing relationships between the Maidens and the Dragoon Guards is an important part of the story of Patience. It's not just about the principals. And so they do have an opportunity there to really be a part of the story. And with that in mind, their emotional stakes I've given a 6 to. That Act 1 finale section, as I was saying in the Teneraria video with the Duke, that is a truly beautiful moment. I only gave it 5 for directorial scope because these are military characters. They can't be too silly. As I say, you can't have them cartwheeling around or doing anything too zany and off the wall. However, I do think that most of the productions of Patience I've seen, the men are really undervalued. I think that often when I see productions of Patience, the director hasn't really done enough work on making this Dragoon chorus vibrant. As a director, when I was doing Patience a few years ago, I didn't spend a lot of time on choreo with the guards. What I did was I tried to just make them smile and be happy about their jobs and just be very wholesome individuals. And you know what? The second they walked out on stage, the audience burst out laughing. I'm like, okay, well, we've done this right, haven't we? I think that often choruses just aren't given enough love by directors. And I will say this, like, especially in professional productions, I think that the chorus are just seen as, oh, we're not really going to worry too much about you. But I think the chorus are often what really makes GNS operas. And as we're getting higher up in the list now, we're really starting to see how if you can make this chorus exciting and vibrant, the soldiers of the Queen, what a great opening number to come out to. This Dragoon Guard chorus can be great. I think they do have their limitations, which is why they are a little bit further down the list, but they are catastrophically underused in most productions of Patience I have seen. So please, if you're going to be directing Patience, try and give some love to the Dragoon Guards. Try and let them know that they can be silly and they can be funny. They don't have to be all stern and militaristic. This is a comic opera. Like, try and give them some vibrancy. And perhaps someone else can give me that same advice, or the ones below on the list, which I don't feel inspired about. So if there's been one down on the list where you think, oh no, I was in a production, we did a great job with this chorus, like, tell me about it. Like, let me know how you brought that chorus that I put quite low down on the list to life. Tell me how you did that, and we can all share our experiences. Number 18, I have given to the villagers in The Sorcerer. I gave them a 13 out of 20 for music. That puts them on a par with the Courtroom audience and Trial by Jury, and just below the Schoolgirls from the Mikado. A 13 is still better than average. It was a high 2-2 when I was at university. It's not a bad mark, but I don't think the chorus music in The Sorcerer is perhaps the best, if we are being honest with ourselves. I gave them a 6 out of 10 for importance to narrative. I don't think that they do have too much to do in the first half, apart from just establishing who the principals are, which they do relatively well. When it comes to the Act 1 finale, they then start to become a very big part of the story. And then, in the opening of Act 2, they are the main part of the story. Just briefly, for about a 5-minute period, you actually get to see some really fun and solely chorus business, which is great. I absolutely love it when it's just the chorus on stage and it's only them that are the focus. I am actually going to do a video that's going to be numbers that are entirely made up of chorus people singing, and some of these are actually the best numbers in GNS, so this is a top class number. I gave them a 6 out of 10 for emotional stakes. I mean, it's quite one note. It's just, I have fallen in love with you after opening my eyes and you're there. But that's still a lot more emotional than the Schoolgirls were from the Mikado, isn't it, if you think about it? So at least they actually get some action. They get to do stuff. I've also given them a 6 for directorial scope and a 6 for stage time. Slightly better than the Citizens in Yeomen for stage time. And directorial scope, yes, they do get to fall in love with each other and they do get to do a fun dance. But apart from that section, which, I mean, what can it be other than a dance, really? Apart from that section, they're just people. Their weaknesses are that you can't pretend they have one brain, much like some of the other choruses that are a bit higher up. They are essentially a group of individuals, and that is always just a bit harder to direct. You can get into giving everyone different characteristics. You can have like a huge variety of like very rich people, very poor people, but then again it's up to the actor and it just becomes a bit more complicated. So unless you have a really top-notch group of amazing actors who have all put loads of work into their specific characters, it is going to be harder work and it is going to look less cohesive than some of the other ones we're going to be talking about. But I love the Sorcerer. I have been in a chorus of the Sorcerer before and I would do so again. Number 17, I have given to the sisters, cousins and aunts from HMS Pinafore. Where this one gets maybe a slightly lower mark is I gave it a 5 out of 10 for stage time. But apart from that, this chorus does do okay. They got a 14 out of 20 for music. They don't have a huge amount of music, but some of what they have is really lovely. The Act 1 finale of HMS Pinafore does have some very glorious musical moments in it. Gaily tripping is fun, that double chorus. I think it's fair to rank them on a par with the Schoolgirls from the Mikado. I gave them a 6 for importance to narrative. Their presence is encouraging to Rafe and Josephine, and their emotional stakes, which I gave them a 7 for, their reactions to Rafe and Josephine in the Act 1 finale do give those two courage and do help them on their journey towards being together. I only gave them a 6 for directorial scope. I don't think there's a whole lot you can do with them just because of their lack of music and their lack of text, but they are lovely. I think they can certainly be very vibrant. They've got a lovely entrance. There's definitely scope for choreo in there. There's emotional stakes there too. But because they are upper class ladies, there is only so much you can really do with them. In the GNS community, I've heard a lot of women say to me that HMS Pinafore is their least favourite because they don't think there's very much for them to do in it, which I don't think is very fair because it has come 17 on this list out of 26. I actually think there are 5 traditionally female choruses that have done worse than this one, but I do see where they're coming from. I think that when it comes to some of the ones we haven't talked about yet, they do fall maybe slightly flat. They don't have quite that same level of vibrancy or stakes or character. It's not clear why it is they're on Rafe and Josephine's side. Hebe, I suppose, is because, so Hebe is the leader of this chorus, and I suppose that she is on the side of Rafe and Josephine because she wants to marry Sir Joseph. But this is not made explicit. And maybe she's gone away and told all the ladies about this situation. I don't know how she knows. It's not clear how they got the information. It just seems like they know what's going on. And I do love the way that they are rooting for love, but it's not clear why they're doing this. We don't get to see their whole journey, which maybe makes it a little bit messy and confusing. There are certainly other choruses whose dramatic trajectory is clearer than the sisters, cousins and aunts from HMS Pinafore. Having said that, love them. I would be in this chorus again. I've only been in it once and that was a very long time ago, but I do not poo-poo this one. I would be in it again. Number 16, I have given to Hildebrand's court / soldiers in Princess Ida. So I'm talking specifically about the people that remain soldiers, so the traditionally male chorus in Princess Ida. I gave them a 16 out of 20 for music. I think they don't have too much, and that's also reflected in their stage time. I gave them a 4 out of 10 for stage time, but the music they do have is glorious because the chorus music in Princess Ida is just generally glorious. I gave them a 7 out of 10 for their importance to narrative because yes, they invade Castle Adamant and they are doing things, and then they do stuff in Act 3. They are very much a body of people that is doing a thing that does progress the story. Even if they are following orders, they are part of it and they are doing stuff which the students can react to. So for that, I gave them a high mark for narrative importance. I gave them a 6 for emotional stakes. I think when you are the clear aggressor of the battle, yes, I think they do get rebuffed, so maybe they get to show a little bit of frustration slash a small amount of fear, but generally the soldiers in Princess Ida are not the ones experiencing a huge deal of emotion. I've also given them a 6 for directorial scope because, again, they're the aggressors and there's not really much you can do with them beyond them invading and taking over, and then they're there. And I don't really know what else you could do with them to make them more interesting than this. But hey, they are a big part of the story. They do a lot. Their music's great. I wouldn't say no to being in this chorus if it wasn't problematic and I felt okay about invading a women's university. But that's for another day. Number 15, I have given to the Professional Bridesmaids from Ruddigore. I gave them a 16 out of 20 for music. They have some really lovely music. Their opening's great. Their responses to Dame Hannah's great. They get to welcome Dick Dauntless on, which is fun. Their Act 1 finale madrigal is lovely. They have a lot of nice stuff to do. The responses to Happily Coupled Are We is also good. I think their 16 is well deserved. It's the same mark that the soldiers just got. So I think that's about right. None of it is mind-blowing, but there's just a lot of it that is pretty good. I gave them a 6 for importance to narrative. They do instigate a lot of the story unfolding, but they are never really a true big part of the story. They help Dame Hannah with her exposition. They welcome Dick Dauntless back. Zora, as the leader of the chorus, does instigate a lot of stuff that happens in the Act 1 finale. She asks Robin who has betrayed him. She then is kind of romantically connected with Dick Dauntless. It's a really good example of the chorus actually getting to truly interact with the principal character. And Dick Dauntless and the Professional Bridesmaids are kind of a couple in a way. I know he ends up with Zora at the end, but in a sense he's ending up with all of them because they do seem to be one kind of amorphous blob. And I like it when choruses are that because I think it's very funny. When choruses do have one brain, even though that might seem limiting as an actor, I actually find that in a way quite liberating. And it's very fun to be part of something big that's all just doing one thing very cleanly. You actually feel very powerful doing that. And it's really fun to be a part of something. So I love it when directors make that decision with choruses. I will say though that Act 1 is way better than Act 2. I think that if this energy had continued through Act 2, this chorus could have come way higher, but they just disappear in Act 2 and they're barely on at all. They're on at the very start and then they come back for the very end. And for that, they only got a 6 for stage time. I gave them a little bit more than the Dragoons because I don't think it's quite as imbalanced there. I do think they get to do a little bit more relatively than the Dragoons do. I gave them a 7 for directorial scope and I gave them a 5 for emotional stakes. I don't think their emotions regarding waiting for Rose to get married so they can get married are particularly weighty, but the reason I put the scope high is because even though that's not a very weighty emotional stake, it is quite silly and funny, and so the scope to do silly stuff with them is pretty good. There's certainly a lot of scope for choreo and just being very desperate and silly, so I wouldn't really call it emotional, but they do get the chance to be silly and just part of the story, and the idea that they're professional bridesmaids is quite absurd, and I think being part of that absurd group is really fun, and the Ruddigore Bridesmaids chorus is one that I'd love to be in again. I think it's a great chorus. There's loads of scope to be fun, silly, comic. Number 14 I have given to the Utopians from Utopia Limited. So this is a full SATB chorus. There's only one chorus in Utopia Limited, and that is this one, the Utopians. They've not done well in a couple of categories. I only gave them a 4 out of 10 for emotional stakes. Apart from coming on at the end in Act 2, I don't think they are anything other than just like, oh, that's interesting. Or, oh, look who it is. Oh, here's this person coming on stage. They don't do an awful lot of stuff that you're really drawn towards or engaged with. I gave them a 5 for importance to narrative, and that's not because they themselves do anything which changes the story, but they do a very good job in supporting the story. So I have given them a 5 just to acknowledge their part in restating what these principles are saying, which helps to hammer each point home, especially in the Act 1 finale. They do a really good job of that. They also do a good job of introducing these characters. They sing Make Way for the Wise Men, they sing Quaff the Nectar. That they keep on introducing characters. Oh, Maiden, Rich and Girton Law. They help set the tone for each principal's entrance. I gave them a 6 for directorial scope because they just have a lot of material. Their lack of character in this specific scenario may actually give them a bit more directorial scope, just because they are always present. I gave them a 7 for stage time. They've got a huge amount of stage time relative to the opera. It's great. It's really lovely to see so much of them. The drawing room music, where they can, depending on what the director wants, each get their moment. Because there are so many principals in Utopia Limited, it's likely if you ever do it, you'll have quite a small chorus. So I would love to be in this chorus, because I feel like even if I hadn't got a principal part and I was just put in the chorus, I'd have such a lovely time, because I would know that I'd have so many moments where I could be highlighted. I gave them an 18 out of 20 for music. That's by far the highest music score I've given so far, but I do think it is incredibly deserved. If you think about Quaff the Nectar and how beautiful that is, the Act 1 finale, those two things alone, I think, give it a very high mark. So all in all, I would love to be in the Utopians chorus. I think it's a really good one. The only reason it's come as far down the list as it did is just because they are kind of wallpapery, but my God, they're very pretty, interesting, silly wallpaper. It's like in the Mikado, the wallpaper's like these beautiful cherry blossoms, but in Utopia Limited, the wallpaper's got like these cat faces on it. You know, it's their wallpaper, but it's very fun, silly wallpaper. And I would love to be in this chorus, even if I was standing still, because the music is just great. And there's probably a lot of opportunities to be quite funny in it. We are on to number 13, so everything from now on is in the top half of the choruses. And number 13 goes to the Yeomen from the Yeomen of the Guard. First of all, I gave them an 18 out of 20 for music, just the same as the Utopians. Not all of the music in the Yeomen of the Guard I think is way up there, but what the Yeomen get to sing is out of this world. I had a little moment in my tenor arias video regarding the ENO's recent production of the Yeomen of the Guard, specifically what they had done to the tenor aria Is Life a Boon. But I'm certainly by no means poo-pooing that production in general. I thought it was really great. I had a lovely time watching it. Special shout out to Wilfred. You were my favourite. I really liked you. You were really funny. I can talk until the cows come home. In fact, the cows are home. They're in bed. They've got cups of tea. They've put their feet up. About the importance of the Gilbert and Sullivan operas being performed by people who can act. Sometimes an opera company, like a strictly opera company, isn't maybe the best choice to perform Gilbert and Sullivan. However, in the case of the Yeomen from Yeomen of the Guard, I honestly feel privileged that I got to experience that. Chorus, come on, Tower Warders under orders, yeah, all really good, all great, but then the gents, all in their yeoman costumes, at the back just went, in the autumn of our lives, and I was like, I honestly went back in my seat. I was truly happy to be alive in that moment and experience just the quality of that chorus. When you get that sung just by, I don't know how many chaps are in that chorus, but God, it must have been like 25, 30 or something, but The quality of that sound, I will most likely never hear that sung again like that in my life, and I was really privileged to hear that. And like, I know that I got upset about Is Life a Boom, but the production was well worth it for just hearing how glorious that music was being sung by such good singers. It was incredible, and as a GNS lunatic, I really, really appreciated that bit. The Autumn of Our Lives, that little section, probably my favourite musical moment in Yeomen of the Guard. That little barbershop-y section. A little bit like the gents' responses to Rafe in A Nightingale and a Maiden Fair to See. It's like that, times 10. It's incredible. Oh, Sergeant Merrill, is it true? Even the responses to Dame Carruthers in her song, which seems like not a very memorable song, but the screw may twist and the rag may turn. It's just the tension that that chorus gives that number. Oh, it's glorious. Up and down and in and out, here and there and round about. That's lovely as well. I think in Act 2, the yeomen and citizens are mostly kind of together. I don't think they sing separate all that much, but just those 3 sections where the yeomen sing without the citizens in Act 1 bring them way up to this point because they're just gorgeous. 18 out of 20 for music. I've probably talked enough about the yeomen music now, but it's good. 6 out of 10 for importance to narrative. They don't do very much, but they are the Yeomen of the Guard, and the opera is called the Yeomen of the Guard. 5 out of 10 for emotional stakes. Again, like, they don't do too much. I guess they can feel shame in the second act for having let the prisoner escape. There's certainly a lot of fear and tension in the Act 1 finale. They get to experience the same emotions as everyone else in the Act 2 finale. There are things to do, but they shouldn't get higher than a 5. It's just not fair. Also, their directorial scope, I wouldn't give more than a 5 either. They're a military group, but unlike the Dragoons, it would feel like you were undermining the text if you were to make the yeomen silly. So in a way that you can do that with the Dragoon Guards, I don't feel like you can do the same to yeomen. They're also meant to be older, so even though when I directed it, I had quite young performers doing it, and I didn't see the need to put lots of makeup on and make them look older, but I also didn't want them skipping around the stage either. I think it's important that they still embody that maturity of an older person, and that does limit their scope, sadly. I do give them a 6 out of 10 for stage time. I think they fare slightly better than the citizens, but not as much as the Utopians. The Utopians do feature a little bit more during the course of the whole opera. I think the fact that they came 13 out of 26, despite being ostensibly quite boring, is just me trying to tell you how good I think their music is. Their musical score just brought it way up in the rankings. Number 12 is the Mortals chorus from Thespis. Those of you who have watched my Thespis video, if I have the skills, I will put that here. But I don't know if I have, or there, but I don't know if I have the skills to do that. But maybe, who knows? Maybe that'll just appear. One of the best entrances of any chorus. Climbing over a rocky mountain, what a banger. It's a great number, and mind I say, I think, with the addition of the tenors and basses, it might actually give it a tiny bit more punch than when the sopranos and altos sing it alone in Pirates. Maybe. Is that a controversial opinion? I don't know. The Railway Song, I know that we don't know that that is the music for sure that was in the Baker Henty version. Just the nature of what that song is, what the lyrics are, the fact that it has to be quite active and bright. I'm just sure that whatever that music was, it was really good. They get to sing in the Act 1 finale, they get the Act 2 opening, they get a whole kind of beauty pageant, much like in Utopia Limited. There's loads for the Mortals to do, but that opening section, that climbing over a rocky mountain, picnic scene, railway song, Jupiter's entrance, Act 1 finale. That is a really good section for the chorus. They get a lot to react to. They're all part of this action. They are actors. That means that they can be silly, they can be individuals, but they can still be zany and silly. And actually having as many off-the-wall characters as you can in that chorus would be beneficial rather than drawing focus, I think. I gave them a 14 out of 20 for music. I think that's fair considering that we don't know what the music is, but I'm just guessing that a lot of that opening section stuff and the Act 1 finale would have been good for the mortals, where it maybe wouldn't have been so good for the gods. I gave them a 7 out of 10 for importance and narrative. This is an example where the chorus really do play a big part of the story. However, their emotional stakes I only gave a 6 because we don't ever really get too high emotional stakes in Thespis. For example, Jupiter could have said, if you fail, you die. There's no stakes here. They get to try experiments, but then nothing actually happens when they don't achieve what they wanted to achieve. When I talk about choruses, I am kind of vaguely including chorus principles in that. So when you think about Timidon, Tipsion, Preposterous, Stupidass, you got some zany characters in here. Can you imagine a climbing over Rocky Mountain railroad song picnic section with all of those characters just really drilled and made really clean? What a great chorus to be in. Really, really great chorus. I gave them an 8 for directorial scope for all of these reasons. I did, however, only give them a 6 for stage time because the choruses are split into gods and mortals. It does mean they do have to share the stage with them. It takes maybe about half an hour for them to come on, and then they're not present for quite a bit of the second half. But I think 6 is fair. They're about on par with the Yeomen of the Guard in the Yeomen of the Guard. Number 11 I have given to the Buxom Blades / Ghosts in Ruddigore. I think they're called the Buxom Blades. Maybe that's just what Leonora Braham says in Topsy Turvy. Where are my buxom blades, Coldemage? But I'm sure I've heard somebody calling them that at some point, but that's what I'm calling them. So yeah. I haven't talked about costumes yet, and it's not fair to include costumes because a lot of these are updated anyway, but this is just a quick note to say that I think the Act 1 costumes that the gentlemen get to wear in a typical production of Ruddigore are without a doubt the sexiest GNS costumes there are. I'm just putting that out there. Full-on Regency costumes. Just close your eyes and picture that for a moment, and if you can think of a sexier chorus, let me know in the comments, but I certainly can't. I've not given them any points for that, I just thought it was worth mentioning. I gave them a 17 out of 20 for music. Welcome Gentry's great, Act 1 finale's great, but that ghost section? Painted emblems of a race! Then pardon us, then pardon us, then pardon us, or die. Getting to sing the responses to Roderick in High Noon. They don't have much stage time. I gave them a 6, which may be generous, but they just have such an impact when they are on, especially as the ghosts, that I did beef that up to a 6 because they are just so much the focus then. And it is a good long section, and it is the big climax of Act 2, so I think that's fair. I gave them a 6 for emotional stakes. There is a version of Ruddigore, maybe I'll do it one day, where these ghosts aren't funny at all, but just incredibly tragic. And they're all very traumatised and all remembering the experience of being tortured and dying. And that can maybe be reflected in their individual characters. But generally, I don't think that's particularly done. I gave them a directorial scope of 7. I think you can have a bit of fun with the ghosts, but you are limited to them having to come out of picture frames. When I did it, I couldn't afford frames, so they just stepped forward. So you don't have to use picture frames, but they should be still and then start moving. I don't really think there's any way you can not do that. And the fact that they're meant to be pictures does imply they're quite static even when they are doing things. The reason I gave them a high directorial scope is because of that scene. And also the Welcome Gentry Act 1 finale section, there's quite a bit you can do with that, because these characters aren't very well defined. And the music is just so jaunty. There's a lot of choreo you can do in that. There's choreo you can do in the Act 1 finale. There's that whole gavotte section. The fact that they get to be two different choruses in the same opera, I think is pretty cool. I would really love to be in the traditionally male chorus of Ruddigore, because I'd love just to be those two different choruses and get to be in that ghost section and just add my presence to that. I gave them a 6 for importance to narrative. I think if their presence as ghosts had been a bit more apparent throughout the opera, I may have given them higher. Maybe there's something you can do with that. I don't know. I mean, do they have to be gentry in Act 1? What if they were ghosts all the way through? What if the gentry are actually the ghosts in disguise? Because they are following Despard around, aren't they? They are Despard's evil crew, but who are they? What if, in the village, it was just known that these ghosts all existed? I mean, I think it kind of is known that these ghosts have existed. If they were the ghosts all the way through, how cool would that be? Somebody should do that. My idea. I thought of it first. Mine. But no, you can steal it. It's fine. But that would be cool, I think, to just have them be the ghosts all the way through. You'd also save on costumes, but then you wouldn't get to wear the sexy costumes, which is a drawback. I'm going to do a lot of thinking aloud in these videos. Remember that a lot of this is spontaneous. I'm just having ideas left, right and centre as I'm making these videos. They got a 42 out of 60, which I think is a good score. The only drawback to this chorus is just their lack of stage time, the fact that it's fragmented, the fact that gentry don't really have much of a character, but it is made up for with how great the ghost chorus is. If only they could be ghosts all the way through, somehow. Top 10! Number 10, I have given to the Rapturous Maidens from Patience. This is a chorus that I would be in every day. They are so funny. Really, really, really funny. 7 for their importance to the narrative. I think that their relationships with the Dragoons are a big part of the story. Their love for Bunthorne, a huge part of the story, and their subsequent love for Grosvenor, almost even more so. Their presence in the story is only surpassed by a couple of other choruses, honestly. I gave them a 7 out of 10 for emotional stakes. While they do get to be very in love and very close to these principles and directly reacting to them, much like in Ruddigore with the Bridesmaids, I don't think there's much weight that can really be placed on these emotions. The most emotional moment they really get, the most genuinely emotional moment, is in I Hear the Soft Note in the Act 1 finale. Apart from that, it's all very put on. But hey, there's not a problem with that. It's extremely funny. I gave them a 9 for directorial scope. The sheer amount of levels you could get with these maidens, the only reason they didn't get a 10 is because in all of these aesthetic paintings, they are quite static, so there's not too much scope for choreo there, but they do get Let the Merry Cymbals Sound, which is quite a nice moment, maybe even a magnet hung in a hardware shop. Just getting to be very aesthetic and emotional and dramatic. That to me is really fun. I've been in a chorus of Patience twice, and I did have a good time both times with this. I gave them a 7 for stage time. That's the same as the Utopians, I think, relative to the length of the opera. They are quite prominent, and when they are on stage, they do get to do so much fun stuff. They're constantly reacting to what's going on. There's so many moments where the chorus do something that makes the audience laugh. Let us think of nothing at all. When Bunthorne tells them to listen to his poem and they all have to cling to each other. There's lots of scope for them to be directly funny. It isn't just that they are supporting the principles, they are also funny in their own right, which I think is just really important in a chorus. I gave them a 14 out of 20 for music. So that's on a par with the Sisters, Cousins and Aunts and the Mikado. Generally, I think the music in Patience does maybe let it down slightly. The ladies' chorus do get several numbers in a row that are just the same tune over and over again, 20 Lovesick Maidens We, which is only really good because it's funny, and then they sing it several more times. Unless you can really commit to how over-laboured that is, which, don't get me wrong, I would do as both an actor and a director. They do sing that a lot. But yeah, Rapturous Maidens, what a hoot. 10th place. Coming in at 9th place, we have General Stanley's Daughters. That's my third attempt at saying that. From the Pirates of Penzance. This is a chorus I've been in several times. I absolutely love it. The music's good. I gave them a 15 out of 20 for music. Slightly better, I think, than the Schoolgirls from the Mikado. They get mostly 7s across the board. They get a 7 for stage time. They are on the stage maybe a little bit more than some of the others we've been talking about. They get to be very emotional. They get to be fearful of the men coming on, if that's the way you want to do it. They get to be excited about going to the seaside. They get to experience the beauty of poetry in the Act 1 finale. They get to be rousing the men in When the Foeman Bears a Steel. There's a lot to do, but I wouldn't place the same weight on it that I've maybe placed on some of the ones that are going to come above it, which is why I've given it a 7. So you'll see why when I talk about the ones above it, why there are some that I have given that higher mark to. I have, though, given them an 8 out of 10 for importance to the narrative. General Stanley's Daughters are very important to the story of Pirates of Penzance. Definitely in Act 1. So their little arc they have in Act 1, from their entrance to the end of the Act 1 finale, they are a part of that story just as much as any of the principals from their entrance until the end of the Act 1 finale. In Act 2, maybe not so much, and foemen there just rousing the gentlemen. And then when they're coming at the end, yes, they become very much part of the story. The stakes for them are really high because the outcome of what's going on here is actually going to affect them. And I do think that that does make a chorus much better, much more enjoyable to be in. I've also given them a 7 out of 10 for their directorial scope because there's so much you can do with them. As I say, they experience all these emotions. They can also dance around a lot. They can be different people, or they can be one amorphous blob. Also, the music gives you a lot of clues as well. It makes it quite clear what style the dancing should be in. They've also got some really fun moments. I'll talk about this bit more in my recit video, but the Stop Ladies Pray, Amen! That is a great bit. When the men come on to marry them, there's a lot you can do with that bit. I don't like it when the men come on and like pick up the women. I think that's not very nice and a bit weird and uncomfortable to watch, but there's so much you can do with that bit. There's just a lot of scope to react and be funny and use the music and be a part of the story. I think this is a really great chorus and it's very well deserved to have its place in the top 10. Number 8, I have given to the Sailors from HMS Pinafore. This was not a chorus I thought was particularly good until I directed it and realised there's actually a lot of stuff you can do with these guys. They've got some really gorgeous music. I gave them a 16 out of 20 for music, which I was surprised about because I don't think of HMS Pinafore as being terribly good musically. The opening is fun, the responses to Rafe are beautiful, A British Tar is a Soaring Soul, another really lovely number. Carefully on Tiptoes Ceiling is fun. These chaps have a lot to do. I think that this is a really lovely chorus, music-wise. I've also given him an 8 out of 10 for narrative importance because these sailors have a lot to do with the principals. They have direct contact with Dick Deadeye and Rafe Rackstraw. They are encouraging Rafe to pursue his dreams, but also crushing Dick Deadeye's dreams at the same time, which is not at all fair. They're not a very fair chorus. Their moral principles are a bit out of whack, in my opinion. I gave them a 7 out of 10 for emotional stakes because they do get to, along with the sisters, cousins and aunts, they get to experience the principals having all these really hugely emotional moments. But they do get that added extra of being sailors themselves and so ostensibly working class. The fact that Rafe wants to be with the captain's daughter in Act 2 and they're standing behind him, like backing him up. That is a very powerful moment for them as well, because I'm sure that if they openly associated themselves with this relationship, they'd also be punished. They're going to be punished for colluding in that. So they are very much a part of this story in the way that maybe the sisters, cousins and aunts are not quite so invested. I gave them a 7 for stage time and a 7 for directorial scope. There's a lot you can do with them choreo-wise. I mean, they are sailors, so there's only so far you can go. And a lot of the choreo is kind of set by what the music is. Like, you know, it has to be a hornpipe. You can only push the choreo so far, I think, in HMS Pinafore. But they do get a lot to do. They are funny. He is an Englishman. It's a funny song. To be a part of that song, even if you're just the responses, I think that's really cool. They get a 45 out of 60, which I think is a good mark. Number 7, I have given to the Pirates/Police from the Pirates of Penzance. I've not split these into 2 because I feel like they would have just come next to each other anyway. When it comes to which one you'd rather be in, I suppose you just have to decide if you'd rather do more dancing and cat-like tread, or if you'd rather be a bit sillier in Policeman's Lot is Not a Happy One. But those are the only numbers that they really differ in, so I think it's fair to just talk about them as one chorus. I gave them a 15 out of 20 for music. That puts them on a par with General Stanley's Daughters. I think the music in Pirates is pretty good, especially for the chorus. But it's maybe not as good, actually, as the Sailors in HMS Pinafore. I do think those barbershop harmonies in HMS Pinafore do just bring that slightly above them musically. Importance to the narrative, I gave a 9. The pirates and policemen in the Pirates of Penzance are one of the main driving forces of the opera. Yes, Frederick and the Pirate King and Ruth, they make these decisions that do drive the opera based on their duty, but also the chorus are very much part of the action here. And the emotional stakes, yeah, I gave a 7 too, because I don't think there's as much emotional weight as there could be. There are life and death stakes in When the Foeman Bears the Steel, but they are somewhat played for laughs and not presented in a very genuine light, which does bring it down to a 7, I think. But I've given them an 8 for stage time and a 7 for directorial scope. I think there's a lot that you can do with these guys, even though I do love the Pirates of Penzance. Even though I do love the Pirates of Penzance, I do think the opening up until "Oh False One, You Have Deceived Me" is weak, and I don't think the Pirates have much scope there. I have really struggled with this section as a director in the past. There's really not much you can do with those pirates, especially during the dialogue. They're kind of just standing around. I don't really know what you do with them unless you were to carefully choreograph lots of fighting going on and you had the money to put in lots of props and have lots of levels. It is difficult when all you've got are people. I think you need a backup of having lots of stuff on stage for them, and that is a drawback for them directorially. The pirates are a bit of a slow starter, I think, and for that they've only come in number 7 and not higher. But they are a great chorus. I'd like to be in it. Thank you very much. Number 6 I have given to the Contadine chorus from the Gondoliers, one that I am very recently familiar with, having just directed it. I played Casilda in this, and I was very jealous of the Contadine chorus. I have been in it before, but it was a very long time ago, and my memory of it is hazy, but I had a lot of fun choreographing them, and I think I would have really enjoyed to be in that chorus. I gave them a 19 out of 20 for music. I think this is better than Utopia Limited musically. Mind I say I think? It's even slightly better than what the Yeomen get in Yeomen of the Guard. Even though nothing they have quite matches up to that in the autumn of our lives, they just have so much good stuff. Here we are at the risk of our lives. List and learn. Merriest fellows are we. Dancer Cachucha. Everything in the Act 1 finale. I think this is truly beautiful music. And getting to sing it, especially if you have a very good musical director, I think would be an absolute joy. And as well as getting lots to do musically, they also have a ton to do physically as well. There's so much scope for choreo in this. I gave them an 8 out of 10 for directorial scope. I gave them a 7 for stage time, which I think is fair. They're not on quite as much as the Gondolieri are. I also only gave them a 6 for emotional stakes, even though they are also saying goodbye to the Gondolieri at the end of the Act 1 finale. I don't think we really buy that they're as upset as Tessa and Ginetta are, because they're not necessarily coupled up. I didn't couple them up when I did it because it's not explicitly said that that's what's happened yet. I would like to think that they'd take a bit more time to decide and just be friends for a bit first. But that's just me being sensible and modern and maybe unromantic. Maybe I should have let them couple up immediately, but I think it's fun to let them play the field a bit and have fun swapping around with each other. So that's what I did. I gave them a 7 out of 10 for importance to narrative in the same way that the Utopians do. They don't do much themselves that drive the narrative, apart from in the opening. The opening section, of course, like they do loads of stuff there. But after that, they're mainly observers, but the kind of observers they are really highlights what the principals are doing. They're very emotionally supportive of the principals. So I do think very highly of this chorus. I think there's a lot of scope for dancing. They get beautiful costumes, just like the gents do in Ruddigore. Even though I said I wouldn't mention costumes again, I do think that when you dress up the Contadine traditionally, those costumes that they wear are just loads of fun to dance in, because you've got those circle skirts and you can spin and the skirts go out, and there's even scope for maybe them having instruments like tambourines and maracas and things. There's just so much fun you can have with these parts. I do think, though, that there's not many real stakes for them. So that's where they maybe fall slightly down. But in terms of presence and joy, I think they score really highly. It's just that they're not quite as invested in the story. Number 5, I have given to the Piers chorus from Iolanthe. We're really getting into the cream of the crop now. These are all just such fantastic choruses to be a part of now. Remember, we had 26 at the start. 16 out of 20 for music. Loudly Let the Trumpet Bray. I do not think that their section with Phyllis is relatively that good compared to the other stuff in the opera. Act 1 finale, though, that's very good. In Vain to Us You Plead is very funny. Streffen's a Member of Parliament. I think a 16 is a fair mark. I think largely that is because of Loudly Let the Trumpets Bray, because that is just such an iconic, epic chorus number. After that, they get 8s across the board. They get an 8 for their importance to the narrative. Obviously, the peers are hugely important in this narrative, and their emotional stakes, 8 out of 10. They get to be in love with Phyllis. They get to be indignant on her rejecting them. They get to be fearful of the Fairy Queen. They get to be quite arrogant and pompous all the way through. They also get to be quite disparaging of the fairies in the second half. There's a lot of scope for emotion here. I gave them an 8 out of 10 for directorial scope. I do think that was generous just in terms of their choreography. I do think their traditional costumes would make their choreo maybe a little bit limited. And because they're meant to be peers of the realm, it maybe means you can't do too much with them. Having said that, when I did a lot of extravagant choreo with them when I directed it, that did go down very well. So maybe we're not being silly enough with them. Maybe we should be giving them kick lines and loads of stuff to do. They do get to wear cloaks, which are fun to like sweep. So we took advantage of that quite a lot. I'm talking about costumes again. Shouldn't talk about costumes because they'll be different every time, but anyway. I gave them an 8 out of 10 for stage time. I think they've got one of the best out of any chorus. And just what an entrance, honestly. It must just be so fun to be so pompous and so up themselves. It's a kind of acting that Gilbert and Sullivan have done quite a lot of the work for them, which means coming out of your shell as a chorus member is actually quite easy. I'd say for this reason, Iolanthe would be a really good one for a beginner to do if they hadn't been in one before and they just wanted to be in the chorus. Iolanthe would be a great one to do to start off with, because it's very easy to know what you should do with your body and what you should do with your face when you are met with these lyrics and this music. And it just makes the director's job a bit easier as well. Cracking chorus. Downsides of this chorus, I don't think they experience anything that has too much emotional weight, if I'm honest. The fear they have from the Fairy Queen in the Act 1 finale isn't really carried over into the second half. They just seem more disgruntled. I don't think that that was pushed maybe as far as it could have been pushed. And that's maybe why they don't get more than 8s in these categories. Number 4, I have given to the Gondolieri from the Gondoliers. Now, much of what I've said has already been covered in Contadine, so I won't spend too long talking about this one, but just the fact that they do get quite a bit of extra material in the beginning of Act 2, and that material is very funny and it's good musically. There's a lot of scope for the chorus to be involved with Giuseppe's song. For that reason, I think they do have a bit more importance to the story. They got an 8 out of 10 for that. They got an 8 out of 10 for stage time. I don't think their directorial scope is maybe quite as high as the Contadine. I only gave them a 7. I would say that because the Contadine are idealising Marco and Giuseppe, but the Gondolieri, their emotions are maybe a little bit more genuine towards the Contadine. I think that does mean that their emotional stakes aren't quite as high as the Contadine. I think the Contadine get to have a little bit more fun at the start than the Gondolieri do. Having said that, that is made up for, I think, in the second half with all the stuff they get to do with Giuseppe. They have some fun dialogue and they all get to do that fun thing where they get to respond as a chorus together in text. There are some really great chorus principals in the Gondoliers. Antonio gets an absolute banger of a number right off the bat. Giorgio is funny. Francesco gets that really awesome opening line. Annibale has some really great lines. I do think that when you look at the chorus principals in the Gondolieri chorus compared to the chorus principals in the Contadine chorus, they are a bit more fleshed out and vibrant. And I do think that the Gondolieri, on the whole, have a little bit more scope and a little bit more fun stuff to do in the Gondoliers. They're a bit more present in the story, even if choreo-wise and emotionally you can't push them quite as far as a Contadine. I do think they rank slightly above them because of all those things. Number 3, and coming in at 50 out of 60, is the Fairies chorus from Iolanthe. The Fairies chorus is the only one in the whole list that I've given a 10 out of 10 to for directorial scope. When it comes to fairies, i.e. magical beings, there is just absolutely no limit to what you can do. Honestly, if you had all the money in the world, you could put them on harnesses and get them to fly around. You can make them do magic. You can have them do anything you want them to do. And there's also so much scope for dancing. There's so much scope for comedy. They have lots of stage time. I gave them an 8 out of 10 for stage time. They're one of the most present choruses there are. I also gave them an 8 out of 10 for emotional stakes. Even if they don't have quite as much weight maybe as other choruses, they do get to experience an awful lot of emotions. They get to be thrilled that Iolanthe's come back from the river. They get to be triumphant in the Act 1 finale. They also get to be a bit more victimised and downtrodden in the second half when they all fall in love for the first time. And they realise that, oh, actually these humans are quite sexy, aren't they? So there's a lot that they go through. The only drawback to the Fairies, the only thing that made them not come higher, was just maybe that their music isn't quite so good as some of the others above them. I gave them a 16 for music, and if it hadn't been for that 16, I think they may have even got second place. I gave them an 8 out of 10 for importance to the narrative. They drive the narrative. The fact that the fairies have magical power, but that magical power is not strong enough to overcome human society and the feelings of love they have for the peers. And the peers, they have all the power that we really consider important in society. Wealth, status, respectability, despite them being kind of stupid It's two different kinds of power, and when that power clashes, their weaknesses are all revealed. So the peers realise, oh, actually, when we're face to face with people who actually have brains, we're kind of useless. And the fairies realise, well, yes, we have all the power in the world. We could magic you to death, probably, if we wanted to, but you as humans have this power over us, which we are actually very vulnerable to. And the Fairy Queen admits herself that she is vulnerable to that. And maybe it didn't get higher in emotional stakes because the emotional weight in this opera is really on Iolanthe and the Lord Chancellor. The rest of it is played for comic effect, but still really good. I love this chorus. I played Fleeter one time and that's it, but I would love to be in the fairy chorus. I do like to dance, and this and the Gondoliers is probably the most dancey one. Number 2, I have given to Ida's students from Princess Ida. So the students of Castle Adamant and Daughters of the Plough, because they get to be in Hildebrand's court in the first scene, but I'm barely going to talk about that, to be honest. They get an 18 out of 20 for music. These people have incredible music. I mean, all of Act 1 of Princess Ida is really good musically, but then in Act 2, Towards the Empyrean Heights, Mighty Maiden with a Mission, all of the Act 2 finale, Ruddigore with Wailing, Death to the Invader, they get such good material. And not only is it really good musically, it's also so rich with emotion and with comedy. I gave them a 10 out of 10 for their importance to the narrative. I think this chorus and their contribution to the story is not rivaled by any other chorus. They are just as much a part of this as Princess Ida is, as Lady Psyche is, as Melissa is. I'm just adding this in afterwards because I don't think I made it terribly clear. My thoughts were a little bit scattered in the making of this video. The point I really wanted to make about the students in Princess Ida, which maybe weren't too clear, are the fact that they really change the course of the story in a way that I don't think any other chorus does. Princess Ida has her path. She has her emotions that are driving the narrative, yet the chorus refuse, very politely, but they do refuse to carry out her wishes. They say, we're scared, we don't want to fight these men, we don't think we can win. And that's quite a big subversion of the narrative. It runs quite differently to the way that you expect stories to run, i.e. there's a hero that's been set up and we're expecting that hero to be triumphant, but in fact, she isn't triumphant, and she isn't triumphant because the chorus let her down. I don't think they're morally blameworthy for letting her down, but they let her down all the same. And that's really why I gave them that big 10 for importance to the narrative, because they really do alter the course of the story because of what they think and feel. And that is a point I don't think I made quite clear enough. And Dora is very cute. Isn't that right, Dora? Good girl. The stakes of them are extremely high. When Hildebrand's soldiers invade their castle and take away their safe space, that is about the highest that the stakes are for any Gilbert and Sullivan chorus. I gave them a 10 out of 10 for emotional stakes. I only gave them a 7 out of 10 for stage time. That's about level with the sailors in HMS Pinafore. They are on a lot, but there's time in Act 2 when they're missing, and that is a bit of Princess Ida that is really memorable, so maybe the fact that they're not there is a shame. But when they are on, they do get to do a lot, and they get to be quite funny as well. They do get to experience every emotion in this opera. I think the scene where Blanche is handing out punishments is hilarious. A double perambulator and all their reactions. You get to really react to stuff, and some of these girls get expelled. I mean, they're mysteriously back later, so obviously that didn't stick. 10 out of 10 for emotional stakes. I gave them a 9 out of 10 for directorial scope. I think there's a ton you can do with them, but maybe they didn't quite get a 10 just because the Fairies and the Contadine get to do a lot of choreo, and there's actually not really any way you can do a lot of choreo in Princess Ida. So I think that means the Fairies do beat them just in that one category, but they do have a lot of scope. I mean, 9 out of 10. So yeah, I think this is one of the most perfect choruses in the Gilbert and Sullivan canon. Like, it came second, but it is just brought down slightly by the fact that they're not as present as maybe some of the others. There is a large portion of the show when they are on as Daughters of the Plough, as Hildebrand's court, not really doing anything other than just being singing wallpaper. Again, it's very pretty wallpaper, but they're not doing much else. But Act 2 onwards and Act 3, their Act 3 music, that's probably what got them an 18 rather than higher, because the Act 3 music isn't as good in Princess Ida. But I do absolutely love this chorus. The Act 2 finale alone, and what you can do with this chorus in the Act 2 finale, this is what brings it to this number 2 spot. And I would love to be in that chorus again. I've already been in it twice, and honestly, it was one of my best experiences of being in a GNS opera, being in the chorus of Princess Ida. We are now on to number 1. One of the GNS choruses. This did not particularly surprise me, and maybe it didn't surprise a lot of you who know that I just absolutely love this show. But number 1 I have given to Ernest Dumbkopf's Theatrical Troupe from the Grand Duke. Even though their emotional stakes are maybe not as genuine or as heartfelt, shall we say, as Princess Ida's students, they get to experience so many different kinds of emotional stakes throughout the course of this opera that they still deserve a 10 out of 10. I only gave them an 8 out of 10 for their importance to the narrative, because they don't quite drive the plot in the same way that the Fairies or Princess Ida students do, but they are present throughout so much of it, and they are also completely wrapped up in this plot as well. So when they come on for My Goodness Me, What Shall We Do? Oh, What a Dreadful Situation, they are just as much as invested in the outcome of this as all the principals. It is life and death. When they come on for the Act 1 finale, they think they're going to die. They think that if Ludwig does not beat Rudolph in this duel, they're going to die. But that also makes it quite funny, as I was saying in the duet video, because the audience know that there's actually no threat, but they think there is a threat. It's just the absolute best of both worlds. Not only do you get to be extremely funny, but you also get to show the very height of fear. They get to show disgust when they're eating the sausage rolls. That's very funny. They get to do a whole dance number in Act 2. And let's not even get started on Your Highness as a party at the door. It is just so silly and funny. The dance section, the roulette song, that's maybe not so physically dynamic, but when Rudolph comes back at the end, there's lots of high stakes there as well. This is an example of one where, whereas in other GNS operas, the chorus starts off being really important, but then their importance just kind of trails off towards the end. In the Grand Duke, the chorus are just completely there throughout the whole thing. They are on for the last 20 minutes of the show. And yeah, they're kind of wallpapery, but they are also invested in what's going on, because they are part of the same theatrical troupe as Ludwig, as Lisa, Julia, Ernest. They are part of the plot to overthrow Rudolph, so when he comes in at the end, that's big. That is something that affects them. And it's so chaotic. And to be part of that dance at the end, like, I know I'm going to keep going on about this dance, but oh, brilliant. Come bumpers. That's a great number for the chorus to be a part of too. The chorus also get to be drunk with the Baroness. They're not forgotten about, this chorus. They're really a part of the story. It's so much fun to be in. I've only been in the chorus of Grand Duke once. So when I played the Princess of Monte Carlo, I was in the chorus of Act 1 Grand Duke. And I would say rehearsing for and being in the chorus of the Grand Duke was one of my favourite experiences doing a GNS opera. Mind I say, I think even more so than playing a lot of the principal parts I've played. Yeah, of course it's fun to be a principal because you get to really have your moment in the spotlight, but when you're part of the Grand Duke chorus, you really feel like you're part of this united consciousness, and the shared emotions in this one are so important in the way that they're not so important in the Citizens of the Yeomen of the Guard, where they're all different people. They are all different people in the Grand Duke, but they all feel the same thing. And because of that, there's a lot of comedic scope. There's a lot of choreo that you can do that would be fun. Also, just like the Mortals and Thespis, they are all actors, so you can be really off the wall and quite crazy with them. A select few people are going to be pulled out of this chorus to be the Chamberlains, to be the supernumeraries. So there are opportunities in the chorus of the Grand Duke to have a more spotlighted part, to be the focus for a moment. Each of the Chamberlains gets a moment. Most of the supernumeraries get a moment. It's such a fabulous chorus to be in. I think unless you had a really big cast, you are going to be highlighted at some point, even if you're only in the chorus of the Grand Duke. It is just such a laugh. And the music. The music, the music, the music. Oh goodness me. Your Highness is a party at the door. Pretty Lisa fair and tasty. Won't it be a pretty wedding? The entire Act 1 finale. The Grand Duke gets a 20 out of 20 for music for the chorus, and that is 100% deserved. What glorious music to sing. I think it's even better than the Contadine's music in the Gondoliers. Even better, on the whole, than the Yeomen's music. Because, as I said before, that big Autumn of Our Lives moment, of course that's beautiful, but just think about the amount of material that the chorus get to sing in the Grand Duke. There's so much of it, and so much of it is just amazing. Listen to the supernumeraries. That chorus, that mini chorus with the prince and princess, that is one of the most beautiful things in the canon. I am glad that something from Grand Duke finally came number 1. I do have my biases. Perhaps you can convince me that actually one of the other choruses should have come number 1, but I do just think when it comes to the material and the scope, this one is just first place to me. I really can't think of any of the others being first place over this one. Thank you very much for watching this video and watching my hair slowly disintegrate. Next time we're going to be talking about the dialogue scenes in The Sorcerer. So until then, try to stay warm, and I will see you next time. Or you will see me, because I'm behind a screen, but it's kind of a one-way thing. That's what I'm trying to say.